Good evening, everybody. Welcome into the Villanova Basketball Report. It's live here on BLS with Bob Long, Tom Trainer, and Kevin Long. We are very excited for the NCAA Tournament, which is upon us at last. And the Villanova Wildcats, the second overall seed in the East region, they will go by way of Pittsburgh. And if they are so fortunate, Boston and then San Antonio on their road to another championship. The last championship, of course, 2016, ran through Houston, and now back to the great state of Texas for the four teams that make it through their respective regions. So, obviously, a lot to get to tonight. We'll talk you through the bracket, talk you off a ledge, back onto a ledge, which player to be the most concerned about, and how to otherwise structure your bracket. But initial thoughts on the bracket, and then what was more embarrassing, the TBS selection show or what you're about to see in 2 minutes' time, Bob Long doing an NFL Combine in a blizzard? Go.
I would still give the most embarrassing to the TBS selection
Wow.
show.
Thank you. So I did a good job?
I wouldn't say that. I just wouldn't say that the TBS
You enjoyed it
selection
too much
show,
for it to be embarrassing.
I did.
Yeah.
I did.
I don't think Kenny and Charles enjoyed any part of that selection show. But anyway, back to the bracket. This is the Villanova Sports Report. So looking at this from a Villanova perspective, I think it's a pretty favorable bracket for them, really. The East region is fairly weak. I think Purdue is a weak 2 seed. Texas Tech scares me a little bit as a 3 seed. Wichita State is not anything threatening to me as a 4 seed. I thought they should have been lower. West Virginia, I think, may give them a challenge in the Sweet 16. But overall, I think they have potentially one of the easiest paths, if not the easiest path to the Final Four. Just my initial thoughts. Obviously playing strong, came off a strong Big East tournament. I think they have a good chance to make a deep run here.
Yeah, my first takeaway and my criticisms, as always, people look immediately to the bubble. Honestly, I don't think that's as important as looking at where they seeded the top, 20 or 25 teams in the country. I think that's much more important to talk about, but, we could go on at length talking about the bubble, I'm sure, and also underseeding some teams and overseeding others, as always, another topic of discussion this year. For example, Kentucky and Arizona, possible matchup in the second round, 2 teams that I think are a bit underseeded, and it makes you wonder, did the committee even watch any of conference play or any of the games the past few weeks? Because there's certain teams that have been struggling recently and others that have been on the rise, and it seems as if that didn't make much of a difference in the committee's eyes. To the committee's credit, as always, this bracket is great in that every region that I look at is difficult to select when you're filling out your brackets. It's for very different reasons in each bracket. You look into Xavier's bracket with a weak 1 seed, arguably one of the weakest 1 seeds I think we've seen in a long time. You could argue Wichita State or Gonzaga at various occasions, but I think that with the weak 1 seed, that West region is wide open, and then you have the questions of West Virginia. Of Michigan being a hot team once again. Will they ride the Big Ten title wave? And then if you look up to the South region in Virginia, it's questionable because you have a weak 2 seed or a potentially weak 2 seed in Cincinnati. Not if you look at the metrics. The metrics love the Bearcats, but then you have that interesting potential Sweet 16 matchup where you have the number 1 overall seed playing 2 teams that were ranked in the top 5 in the country to start the season, and 2 teams that have been on fire recently in Kentucky and Arizona. So that makes it difficult to pick. And then in the East region, Villanova, I disagree with those who say it's by far the easiest road to the Final Four for 1 seed. I think, however, I do think that it's an interesting pick because it seems like, stop me if I sound like a broken record as a Villanova fan, But that second round game against Virginia Tech, with a team that has played a tough ACC schedule, played some of the best teams in the country, very, very close, beat Virginia at home, and with a coach who knows Villanova and Jay Wright's program very well, and Buzz Williams from his years at Marquette. And then you have Alabama with Colin Sexton, one of the best and most scintillating freshmen in the country. But I think if Villanova gets to the second weekend, Purdue doesn't scare me. West Virginia doesn't scare me. Texas Tech doesn't scare me. So I think that bracket is interesting in that way. And then you have Kansas, Michigan State, and Duke and I think all equally capable of winning in the Midwest. So each bracket difficult to pick. So the committee did a great job in that regard. It's going to be exciting.
Should be a great tournament. I don't know. I mean, I guess Kev, Tom went through the bracket. Yeah. Any thoughts?
Sure. Well, I think Tom mentioned, teams getting hot towards the end of the year. He's talking about Kentucky and Arizona. And, you really have to look at the entire body of work. And I think the selection committee actually got this right in looking at, the Maui Invitational and I think they were in Atlantis, Arizona, when they lost 3 games. You have to take some of those games into consideration as well. And, you like to think that all games are equal, but at the end of the day, the games at the end of the season are going to count for a little more because that's the last thing that is left in their mouth, going into the NCAA tournament here. So, I have to think if Arizona loses their last 3 games of the regular season and, their last game of the Pac-12 tournament, or I guess their first game of the Pac-12 tournament, I would have to think that they would have, in fact, been seeded lower than 5. So I think 4. So I think the committee did a good job in tempering their expectations with Kentucky and Arizona as well. I think they were pretty fairly seeded. I think Tennessee is a team to look out for in that South bracket. I like them to potentially beat Cincinnati in their Sweet 16 matchup. I like Cincinnati, but I've just seen it at times where they have let down early, come back late. They were able to do that against some of the AAC teams, specifically the Memphis game that they played on Saturday. Was not impressed by that. So, I don't know if they'll be able to recover against a team like Tennessee if they go on a streak like that. Someone I like in the West is South Dakota State. I'm not big on Ohio State or Gonzaga, to be honest with you. I think they've had a couple of letdown games, both teams. I like them potentially to go to the Sweet 16 there, and I like Houston in that bracket as well. But ultimately, I think UNC is playing some great basketball right now. They lost a close game to, I believe it was UVA in the ACC semifinal.
Final.
It was the final.
Yep.
I was thinking of
They beat Duke in the semi.
They beat Duke. That was it. Yeah, they beat Duke and then lost to UVA in the ACC final. So I really like UNC coming out of that South bracket. I think they'll roll over Xavier. I already touched on the East region with Villanova myself. I also like Texas Tech a lot. I'm not a big fan of Purdue, but I think Texas Tech will have a strong showing this year. And then I also like Duke. I like the ACC a lot this year. I have 3 ACC teams in my Final Four. Kansas and Michigan State are playing pretty well right now, but I like the way that Duke is playing right now, and those top 3 in the ACC are just very, very strong right now. So that's what I'm looking at right now.
All right, there you go. I guess my first thought is that I do like Cincinnati, and I think that game against UVA, if we have the opportunity to see it, is one of those games where you throw cinder blocks on the back of your feet and you try to walk down the road. I mean, try to see who gets to 50 points first, and that team might win that game. Listen, I like the Bearcats. I think they play very well. I think they play tough defense. I don't think they get enough credit for it, possibly because of the conference they play in. But in no way is what they play stylish basketball, and I think we all know that. But at the end of the day, I think they have a very favorable road because I don't know that I trust Tennessee. I know that I don't trust Miami. I know that UVA, while they're playing tremendous basketball, in the past, when they've also had very, very good teams, yes, this might be Tony Bennett's best, they've been bitten by long scoreless droughts. Cincinnati can put them on a drought like that. Can Cincinnati score against UVA? That's also another very fair question. In the East, I also agree that I don't think Villanova's road is an easy one, and it's because here's an unpopular opinion. I think Purdue is the best 2 seed in this field. I think Purdue's absolutely phenomenal, and in some ways similar to Cincinnati. There's nothing about them that jumps off the page at you except for their height. But I think they do everything so well. Carson Edwards is great. Vincent Edwards had spent some time not playing, and he was hurt. I think this is a really, really good Purdue team, so I think that's a tough road there for Villanova after a tough matchup where there's a lot of people coming up I-81 from Blacksburg, Virginia, that are Hokies fans and could make Pittsburgh a tough atmosphere on Saturday. And then from there, I mean, again, don't want to go inch by inch here because we have a lot of fun games for this evening to break down the bracket, but I think Kansas has a nice draw. I think Michigan State is wildly overrated, and maybe not at the 3 seed, but has been all year long. If they establish some level of consistency, can they play well? Yes, they can. I haven't seen it. So if they prove, we'll say, their normal expectations of their level of play on a game-to-game basis this year wrong, I think they have a great road. But Kansas, I think, will get to the Final Four. And then on the other bracket, Xavier, sure, we're saying maybe they're a week 1 seed. North Carolina, they've played well, don't get me wrong, and that's fine. How many losses does a team have to have if they're a top 6 program to fall off the 2 line? I mean, it is on. They double-digit losses this year, 9 in the regular season, and of course lost the ACC championship game. Yes, it's a phenomenal conference. I'll just stop the ACC folks there. How many losses does it take to drop a team off the 2 line? That's my question.
Yeah,
11 apparently.
I would agree with you. I mean, I think UNC is playing very well right now, and no matter where they were seated, I would have had them going far in my bracket, but they're probably not deserving of a 2 seed. I would agree with you there. I think the committee got that one wrong. They were a little bit high, maybe even I mean, you don't like Michigan State. You think they're overrated, but they may have been a more appropriate 2 seed in that situation.
For sure. I think that's very fair. And even the way Michigan finished their season as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe they finished with 7 losses, Big Ten champions. Obviously not the same caliber conference, but, you know, that would have been...
But a darn good conference.
Absolutely. But, yeah, that probably Michigan or Michigan State were both more deserving than UNC.
And oddly enough, Purdue went up to the 2 line over Michigan State, who was ranked ahead of them throughout the regular season. And then Michigan, who beat Purdue in the Big Ten championship game, was unable to top the Boilermakers when it came to this ranking. Just very interesting. And that wasn't like a Sunday afternoon tilt like the SEC. That was on Saturday evening where the committee had a whole night to stew over that. So I found that to be interesting. The other interesting thing I found is 9 teams out of the SEC, guys. In a conference that was struggling to get 3 or 4 in recent years, you look up and down this bracket, is not like they're all teams that are in the first 4. You know, Missouri, a 9 seed, Florida, the 6 seed, although they were expected to be up in the top 10 for the majority of the year. Yeah, this is a conference, Tennessee at 3. Kentucky struggled for a while, came into a 5 seed. Texas A&M is a tough 7 seed that'll play a good Providence team. I thought that the SEC clearly had a great year, and we weren't surprised necessarily because we saw it going in and saw a possibility of this, but just to see 9 SEC names come forward on Selection Sunday was a big deal.
And the SEC is interesting because a number of those teams, you look at Auburn, you look at Alabama, you look at Tennessee, teams that haven't had great success in recent years, or teams that aren't familiar with the NCAA tournament, yet have coaches that are familiar with the NCAA tournament, especially looking at Tennessee, at Auburn,
and Arkansas, right?
And
Arkansas.
Mike
Anderson.
So those are interesting teams because historically, teams that are, you know, you look at a Tennessee or an Auburn, you say, okay, this team has made it. They've had a great season. They're there this year, but this is just the beginning. So this might not be their year. They might get bounced in the first weekend this year, but next year they might be ready to go. They have a taste of the tournament now. They'll be ready for a Final Four run. But they have experienced coaches who have been to the NCAA tournament, have done this before, have made deep runs. So that's very interesting in that regard. And also, what does that say about Kentucky? A team, I mean, once again, it's like a broken record. Here we go again. Kentucky, a young team that struggles early, doesn't impress, plays in a tough conference, and then by the end of the season, they figure it out. They roll through the SEC tournament, make a very, very good Tennessee team who had beat them twice already this year look so frustrated. And a Tennessee team that was on a roll towards the end of the season and has been on the rise all year long. Well, Kentucky, dispatched Tennessee with a fair bit of ease. And so, Kev, back to your point that I wanted to bring up with that Arizona and Kentucky. You mentioned putting credence in early season results, so in tournament results, is very interesting because there is a school of thought out there that more often than not, the preseason, we discussed this a bit last week, the preseason rankings end up to be fairly accurate towards the end of the year when you're looking at how teams perform in March. So, I mean, looking at the Arizona and Kentucky, where they fell, you're suggesting that, well, look at what they did do early in the year and it wasn't so great. However, they were ranked very high, so it's kind of like conflicting schools of thought there. And then the overarching question in my regard into that matchup is, a lot of people have been crying foul that how could you have the number 1 overall seed Virginia Cavaliers potentially facing two of the top 3 most talented teams in the country in the Sweet 16.
I guess because those two of the 3 top most talented teams didn't win enough games in the regular season to be 1 seeds. That's tough.
Or not even a 2 or a 3 seed. So.
Right.
Well, and it's interesting. Kentucky. You mentioned SEC getting 9 teams in. Kentucky, a team that just rolled through that conference tournament, is just a 5 seed.
I mean, they weren't ranked going in.
Right.
Yeah, so if there's four levels, 4 quadrants of teams here, and they're a 5 seed. Simple math tells you they're anywhere from 17 to 20, right? So that makes sense to me on the guidance of they came into their conference tournament unranked. How far do you want them to climb?
Right, exactly. Got to look at the entire body as a whole, and you figure what that means is they jumped up to a 17 or 20 rank, somewhere in that range, which would make sense for a team that had a nice week. They won 3 or 4 games. That sounds pretty good to me. But my question here, I'm thinking about more bubble teams and more reference to Notre Dame. And what have you done for me lately? How do you value a team that has a major injury to a guy like Bonzie Colson? Do you take it for, okay, this is the Notre Dame team with Bonzie Colson for this tournament? Or do you just say, it's the entire body of work?
Yeah.
I don't care who's out. I don't care who's there. What do you do?
Well, we had a comment from the audience about that, about Notre Dame beating Syracuse head-to-head on the road without their 2 best players in that game, and the fact that they played well at the end of the year. And, the tough thing for me, and I think you guys remember this, is back in the day, I would run my own bracketology called the Bracket Breakdown. And I had a book with every team, and I knew who they lost to, who they beat, when, where, with what players, what their RPI was at this time of the year, strength of schedule. Time got away from me. It's not my full-time job. I don't do that anymore.
Life happens.
So all that said, I don't feel quite as fit to speak on this at a granular level as I am about, say, Villanova basketball that we do on that show. So all that said, there could be something completely right to that we're all missing that I didn't know. But I will say that it seems like this year in particular, the committee did not value quite as much, perhaps, the later portion of the season. As in, Arizona State lost a lot of games getting into the tournament. USC played better. However, you look a little bit deeper into USC, they really didn't have one good win all year. Arizona State did. Granted, that was in December, and granted, that's not the same team that's playing right now. So that that's tough, right? Because especially when some of these teams beat one another. Oklahoma State beats Oklahoma, and it wasn't necessarily a fluke down the stretch. And Oklahoma loses 12 of 18 games down the stretch. Why does Oklahoma get in? And obviously they had more out-of-conference success than they did in-conference success and couldn't put it together. That one, maybe that's a team I might have left out. But I think they are assigning this Quadrant 1, Quadrant 2, the quality of the wins. It seems to me that they're putting a lot of emphasis on that.
I understand the argument. The argument for the NCAA selection committee will always be the entire body of work, right? So they're not taking into consideration how a team is playing at the end of the year. I thought they used to, right? But now the buzz phrase is the entire body of work. But that to me just begs the question: like, are you even paying attention? Are you watching? And also, secondarily, does conference play mean anything? And I think conference play, almost more than anything, should be a great gauge, especially when you're picking between two teams from the same conference, who are playing the same teams in conference play. So how are they faring against similar competition? You have USC, who finishes second in the Pac-12, and Arizona State finished, ninth, eighth, somewhere around there. And one team makes the tournament, the other doesn't, and I don't know when the last time was. Somebody has to look up that stat, that the second place team in the Pac-12 didn't make the NCAA tournament. Is beyond me. I know they had a weak year, but still. And then paying attention, I mean, Kevin brought it up earlier. Bonzie Colson, how do you not pay attention to how different a team is with their star player, one of the best players in the country, versus without him? Doesn't make sense. I mean, it really does beg the question. I mean, is the committee even paying attention at times, or are they just looking at numbers? I don't know.
I hear you. I've felt the same way about the football committee in the past. I don't know. I don't know. And I see some comments coming in about Notre Dame, and they didn't have Bonzie. And maybe I'm wrong here. Not that one game should define you, but I thought they lost to Ball State with Bonzie Colson in the lineup. I thought they lost some games that they shouldn't have with Bonzie Colson in the lineup. That said, a lot of mediocre teams with mediocre resumes relative to the college basketball landscape get into this tournament. Did Syracuse deserve to get in over Notre Dame? Personally, I didn't think so. However, I think it's a slight overstatement to say that conference play doesn't matter at all. If conference play didn't matter at all, then Arizona State would be a 3 seed. You know what I mean? They got in by virtue of the
hyperbolic statement.
Right, but they got in by the fact that they really exceeded expectations in the non-conference play, and then they struggled in conference. So they were, their seed was decimated, and now they got to play in Dayton.
Same thing with Oklahoma.
Same thing. Yeah, I mean they don't got to play in Dayton, but
Sure.
You're right. Now they got a 2 seed if they happen to win their game against URI.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the hottest teams in non-conference play right up until that point, and then they hit Big 12 play, and they really just struggled. But Trae Young was taking the world by storm, and everyone thought he was the next Steph Curry, and it was like Steph Curry's back in the NBA now. Is going to be scoring 40 points a game, and everyone was just going nuts. And then his sporting cast.
By the way, huge news there. Huge news is that the Naismith candidates, the national semifinalists for the Naismith Award, Best Player in College Basketball, were announced, and a handsome omission. Trae Young, not amongst the 4 for the Naismith National Player of the Year. Jalen Brunson, Marvin Bagley, Devontae Graham, and DeAndre Ayton are the 4 players that will compete for that honor, which, by the way, and it's not surprising that you see this, but gosh, look at those schools. I mean, Kansas, Arizona, Duke, and Villanova. Very much a microcosm of college basketball right now, and the teams that have been at the top. Those 3 teams for all of time, Villanova a little bit more recently, even though it's been very consistent over this century so far, 18 years here. But that's no surprise. It's just interesting to consider.
I mean, well, 3 of those guys are the best players, or the most valuable players, I should say, on 3 of the top teams in the country.
Who's not? Which are the 3?
Not including Arizona. So 3 of the top team, 3 of the best, handful of teams in the country.
Okay.
Kansas, Duke, Villanova. So those 3 guys are the most valuable players on those 3 teams.
Right.
And then you have a guy who essentially has put his team on his back this season. I'm surprised that we haven't been hearing about DeAndre Ayton with a nagging back injury going into the tournament. But
how about that performance? The game against Oregon, the night after that whole mess came out about Sean Miller and the $100,000 payment and his DeAndre Ayton being the subject of it and whether he was going to play, and it was decided that he was going to play, and it surprised everybody and every major media outlet, and he went off and just had a night. 30-plus points and was just by far the best player on the floor and arguably the best performance in the country all year long by any individual player.
And most importantly for him continuing to play, the only thing that's happened to his draft stock is up and up and up, challenging Marvin Bagley. I mean, I think it's a toss-up almost for 1-2 for those guys. And then, of course, you have, the young fella Adam Azoo, who is a huge question mark. Speaking of teams with question marks, I mean, Michael Porter Jr., Missouri is a team that who knows? I mean,
He's played 6 games now?
I know.
5 games?
An extra week of practice, does that make a difference? Does it not?
I mean, that's a tough decision. Now you're talking about a Missouri team that's playing pretty well coming into this tournament. They've won a few games here.
Against a team that, let me be honest, right? Because we're talking about the ACC and Notre Dame versus Syracuse. Let's throw 2 more teams in there. Florida State, team's a whole lot of blah, if you ask me. Against Louisville, a team that blew them out in the ACC championship. Again, if Virginia doesn't bank that shot and win that game in historic fashion, down 4 at Louisville, that team's in the tournament. Florida State's a lame duck. I mean, we could come back next week and I could be dead wrong and they could be sitting in the Sweet 16. I don't see it. I think Missouri rolls and Florida State licks its wounds.
I think they roll, but I honestly would just leave Porter out of this. I mean, I think they're going to mess up. He's going to mess up the flow of the team. He's played 6 games with them right now.
Interesting.
I'm not
that's
sure.
That's a big question, right?
You got some good
like,
mojo going
adding,
right now.
Right, yeah.
I think you're subtracting by adding this superstar into the mix, to be honest with you.
Boy, I'm going to throw something out there. I would not do that.
I know it's not going to happen. I fully expect to see Michael Porter out there, but
if I'm a head coach, I like my job. Missouri doesn't get there every single year, and you have the best, most talented player in the country, perhaps, and you're going to put him on the bench. If you like your job, you play him, whether you think it's the right decision or not.
Oh, absolutely. But we don't have that job.
That's true.
We're Bob Long Sports speculating about it. So I'm going to speculate.
Slightly
I think it's
lower
a better
paid.
idea for the Tigers to sit Michael Porter.
But here, call me crazy, but I want to use the old adage that we always heard in school, right? Growing up, you hear this from every teacher ever, is that they will reward you for progress. So if you start out, with a C or whatever, and you finish with a B+, they will reward you and give you that A- or that A. Whereas conversely, if you fall down the wayside and you're just between 2 grade points, they're not going to reward you.
Man, I don't know where you went to school.
I mean, every teacher ever, they reward hard work and progress. And I don't understand why the selection committee can't see that when picking the NCAA tournament. Why can't you reward teams who have gone through tough times, gone through injuries, or figured it out, and now they are showing their full potential, fulfilling their full potential, and then versus teams who have just fallen apart and don't know who they are at this point in the season. I don't understand.
Tell you, for 3 guys that came into the show and said, the bubble, it's talked about way too much.
Yeah.
So,
but it also pertains to teams not on the
for
bubble.
sure.
It pertains to Kentucky, Arizona.
Yep.
Seeding is a huge.
For sure. Now, but do you think that Kentucky truly deserved a higher seed than 5? Arizona truly a higher seed than 4? And who do you put them above? Michigan State.
That brings up another interesting question. I mean, because deserved versus potential, or how good I think that team actually is.
Like, do you put Kentucky above Tennessee at the 3 spot? I know they beat them, but Tennessee had a better.
No, you don't.
So
see, that's interesting. I think the bigger question is, that you are knowingly. The committee says they don't think about this. They just look at numbers and look at their overall ranking from 1 to 68. But you are knowingly putting 2 teams in Kentucky and Arizona in the same, 8 with a potential 3rd round matchup with the overall top seed. I think if you're Virginia, that's who's crying foul and saying, how in the heck did Arizona and Kentucky, 2 teams that might be deserving of 4 and 5 seeds, but why the heck is UVA, possibly facing them in the 3rd round?
Right, and I think it's tough to value these teams on that basis. I mean, I'm not sure what exactly goes on in the war room there, but like you said, the only way to really do this is to rank these teams on a scale of 1 to 68, and then you put the pieces all wherever it is. So if you have the number 18 team, and that would turn out to be, what would that be, like the number 2-5 seed or something like
right.
that.
Let's
Whatever
just
that
say it's
is.
Kentucky.
Let's just say that's Kentucky, and then they just slot in right there. You know, you can't really have any sort of input on, you know, who goes where, and if these hot teams are going to, you know, play against the number 1 overall seed. You know, it just kind of is what it is. It falls where it may, and you just have to look at the whole body, you know, as a whole, as a complete season.
Now, if I may, because this is where it gets really interesting here. We say a 5 and a 4, they deserve that. Okay, does UVA deserve both of them? We don't know whether Kentucky or Arizona necessarily were their top 4 and 5 seeds. However, you look across the way in the Midwest, and you have Kansas. Kansas's 4 and 5 seeds are Auburn and Clemson. Auburn has struggled mightily down the stretch. Clemson is missing their best player, and I kind of was just lukewarm about them this year. And so is that fair to Kansas versus Virginia? I think that is kind of where the conversation can go from there, and I think it's very, very interesting. But that's a lot of good bracket talk, and I think I need a breather. Don't you guys? I feel like I need a breather, and I got a breather last week. Kev, maybe you can tell the good folks out there why I needed a breather last week, and we got a special video coming up in a minute and a half.
Sure. So if you guys have been watching the Pick'em Challenge or watching our Nova Sports Report this entire year, you would have seen that Bob and I have been having our Pick'em Challenge. It's a game where we pick 3 games a week against the line. You get 10 points for an upset. You lose 10 points if you are favored and lose. And then you also get the difference of the line to the final score. So if you pick the team +5, they won by 5, you get 10 points for the score, 10 points for the upset. That's basically how it went. So we picked these teams all year.
How did I do?
At the end of the day, I believe I just got Bob by a few points, maybe 10 points or so. It was like 110 to 100, something in that range.
And so you were really nice
statistician
and just said, hey, pat me on the back, great job, right?
Sure. Nah, so I gave him a slight punishment. It wasn't too bad. Could have made it harder. I gave Bob the punishment of doing an NFL Combine, and this was the day before the blizzard last week. So I had him do it in the blizzard. So, running a 40, doing the broad jump, doing the high jump. I didn't have him bench press 225. That would not have gone well. Plus, we would have had to do that indoors. We were trying to make this a blizzard affair.
Oh, man.
I had
any broken branches.
I know, we could have done it. It would have been great.
So
reps.
We have a little
3.
video I was taking while Bob was doing his NFL Combine, and he's going to share it for your viewing pleasure here now.
NFL Combine, blizzard style. Let's get after it. All right, there you go. There. Thank you very much, Kevin. Appreciate you putting me through that.
Well done, Bob. Very good combine. Not sure why the Eagles went out and got Haloti Nada.
Crazy,
You're
man.
coming up on the draft this year.
Yeah.
Those defensive lineman drills were excellent.
Thank you. I tell you, he's Haloti Nada, and I can accomplish just about nada in a NFL combine, but I do my best. Anything, boys? Just going to leave it unstated, uncaptioned. All right.
Saquon Barkley's not sweating, but
No. Neither was I. It was cold, man. Oh, my goodness.
Although you had a much more entertaining vertical than he did.
Yes.
Somehow.
Short-lived.
Yeah.
So well done.
Needed the stick to hit the wire there.
Yeah, thank you.
That was impressive.
The wire is high. I was standing in a foot of snow. What do you want from me?
Whatever.
I like when you turned your ankle trying to get
Yeah.
the running start.
Yeah, that was tough. You can do that, right? You're allowed to do that?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, next year's combine, maybe.
So we have another challenge that I'd like to lose. Don't know what that punishment will be, but we decided that we are going to pick 8 teams in the NCAA tournament based upon their seed and upon the round that they're in. We get points. So if it's a 6 seed winning in the first round, it's 1 point. If it's a 6 seed in the second, or 7 points. If it's a 6 seed winning in the second, it's 7. Third.
8. Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. So 6 plus the 2, so 8. 6 plus the 3, it's 9, etc. So if they were to win the national championship, that would be their 6th game. It would be 12, right? And so
Points each round. Yeah, it's not just
Right.
Yeah.
Adds on. So then we decided we're not going to all pick 1 seeds. It wouldn't be very prudent anyways, but 4 quadrants, 1 through 4, 5 through 8, 9 through 12, 13 through 16. You're picking 2 teams from each quadrant. Playing games do not count. So, shall we? We should go through and draft.
Let's do it.
We're going to draft.
We randomized ahead of time, and Kevin, with the first overall pick in the Villanova Basketball Report Team Challenge.
We should have sat in some sort of order here that made sense. We'll work through it. All right, so my first team, Villanova Sports Report. Gotta go with Villanova.
Hey,
Love
nice.
the Cats.
All right, I'm second. I think Kentucky, as the 5 seed, I wanted to go up and grab them because I think they have a chance to get a lot of points. Villanova's great, but you're only getting 1 point for the seed each time they win, plus the round.
Going to quadrant 2. Nice, good pick. I am going to stick in quadrant 1, but go with the 2 seed, the Duke Blue Devils. I think they're really good, playing really well. Figured out that defense since they switched to zone. I like Duke.
And
oh yes, that's right. I'm next.
Hey!
Woo! Snake draft. Here we go. I am going to go to quadrant 3. Take the 10th seeded Butler Bulldogs. Let's go, Keelan Martin. Let's go. Make me look good.
all right, me next. All right, I'm going quadrant 1. This team has a chance to get me a lot of wins, so maybe I give away that end prize, that 7 points if a 1 seed wins the NCAA tournament. But give me Michigan to give me 3 points in the first game. I think they beat Houston, San Diego. I think they beat UNC, and then have as good a shot as anybody to come out of that region into the Final Four. Michigan out of the West.
All right, so that leaves you with 2 picks here. So I'm going to finish up my quadrant 1. I'm going to go with the UNC Tar Heels. Strong team, 2 seed, but I feel pretty good about them. Then I'm going to dip down into the 3rd quadrant, go with the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. 12 seed, potential to get to the Sweet 16 there, potentially a lot of points from the Jackrabbits.
You know, I spent some time out in South Dakota this summer. That entire state is South Dakota State Jackrabbits fans. You'd be really surprised to know that.
I'm not. Is there anything else there?
No. Actually, there's some good stuff, man. Go check out South Dakota. It's a wonderful place. Go climb Mount Harney. Go to the Badlands. Go to Mount Rushmore. Ship over to Wyoming and check out Devil's Tower. That Devil's Tower thing is amazing. If you don't know it, look it up. It's like a big cork that comes out of the ground. How the hell did it get there? I'm picking Ohio State as a 5 seed. I think they can get me some points. Ohio State.
Bob sees your South Dakota State and takes
Wow.
Ohio State.
Yeah.
First round matchup.
That's
Big
right.
stakes in that game. Okay.
Yes, like big stakes that come from both Columbus, but especially South Dakota. Big stakes, I'm telling you, man.
There are bison in South Dakota.
There is.
No,
I
there
had
you
some
go.
bison meat. It was
Boom.
phenomenal.
Very good. All right.
Phenomenal.
So I get 2 now. All right. I am going to go back to Quadrant 1, the South. Ooh, a team that's really interesting. I'm going to go with Tennessee. 3 seeds. It's a 3 seed. You know, that could get some good points. That's a team that I actually have in my Elite 8. A team that I think is just really strong defensively. They're a very balanced team inside, outside. That Wright State game scares me. I mean, they potentially have to face Cincinnati in the Sweet 16, but give me the Volunteers.
Rocky
Feeling
Town.
Cincinnati the way Bob is.
You'll
No,
always be
not feeling Cincinnati.
home sweet
And then,
home to me.
Speaking of Home Sweet Home and good songs about the Appalachian Mountains, I'm going to go with West Virginia. Take Me Home, Country Road.
Ooh.
How far?
We don't want
Do you
them
want
going too
how
far.
far down the road, man?
What do you mean?
How far down the
What do you
road
mean?
for West Virginia?
Oh, right.
What do you
as
mean?
a
What do we
Villanova fan, I don't want them going that far. But they're just a team that I think has the potential. They have a lot of upperclassmen, Bob Huggins, a team that has been on the edge, and this could be a year they reach the precipice.
All
I
right.
hope they don't, but it could be.
Give me. So I'm going to take 2 teams here. I'm going to take the
Whoa,
winner
whoa.
of St. Bonaventure and
Oh.
UCLA.
That's not fair.
Yeah, well, hey, listen. Whoever wins the
Oh,
playing game,
all right.
I think they have a chance to take down the Gators of Florida.
Okay.
Home
Okay.
birthplace of Tom Petty, Gainesville, Florida.
All right.
While we're talking about music.
All right.
You
So
stick with a theme, Kev?
Yeah, music. Got to be music. Otherwise, you can't
yeah,
pick
no,
them.
I can't pick
I
'em.
can't pick them.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
music? All right.
Maybe you can. Is there music involved?
I don't know. What kind of music do I like in Houston? Because that's what I'm going with.
Hey, there you go.
All right, so yeah, it's sticking in quadrant 2, going with 6 seed Houston. Going to run into a tough matchup, I believe, in the Sweet 16 with UNC, but I like them to go to the Sweet 16. And then I'm going to dip into quadrant 4, UNC Greensboro.
Ooh.
For more or less, I just think that they have a chance to beat Gonzaga.
Wow.
I don't
And you
think
had to pick 2 teams.
I don't think a whole lot of
Alright.
teams. I actually don't have one team 13 through 16 in my bracket winning.
Whoa.
So I am just going with the best of the best, best of the worst, I should say. So UNC Greensboro over Gonzaga.
Give me the College of Charleston. They'll shoot you into and out of a basketball game. But Auburn, with
Yeah.
my boy Jared Harper and Bryce Brown, just not playing good basketball right now. So you had to pick somebody out of that quadrant. I'm going to go with the College of Charleston. Gave Davidson great battles back in the day in the SoCon, who, by the way, is a 12 seed in this tournament out of the A10, the AQ there,
All right.
who I'm not picking.
Cool.
but-
Yeah, that game could be fun. That could be a shootout in the first round. That'd be a fun game to watch. I am going to stick with the upset theme and go with what I think is probably the most popular upset pick of the first round, and that is Loyola Chicago. First time in the tournament, and I just, hey, Miami, I think they're weak. A lot of people think so.
Lonnie
and I
Walker, we
agree.
hardly knew ye.
Yeah.
Off to the NBA, perhaps.
I'm going to go with Loyola Chicago to make a run. And then the Long Brothers' favorite city, that is not Philadelphia. Let's go Buffalo.
Hey-oh, hey-oh.
I'm going to take Buffalo against Arizona. We'll see what can happen, see if we can get some magic. I'm going to take Buffalo from quadrant 4.
All right. Give me the Lumberjacks of Stephen F. Austin playing Texas Tech. That game, if I am not incorrect, is in Dallas. Oh, that could be fun. Little fun in-state rivalry in Tejas. And I think Texas Tech maybe not playing its best basketball.
All right, back to me. In quadrant 3, I like New Mexico State. I like their first round matchup against Clemson. Like you said, their best player out with an injury right now. New Mexico State, very good team, very winnable game. Auburn potentially in the next round, also kind of screeching to a halt here. Chance to see New Mexico State in the Sweet 16, so that's what I'm going with. And then taking my last quadrant 4 team, Wright State over Tennessee. Now I actually have Tennessee in my Elite 8, so that would be detrimental to my bracket, but
It's like a put option, though. You're guaranteeing
yeah.
yourself something.
sure.
You're reducing your upside and your downside, which
Yeah.
is actually unlike a put. One
Hedging my risk here, if you will. But it's not the same thing because it's two separate bets. So anyway, Wright State has the potential. Good Horizon League team. They have the potential to upset Tennessee if they don't come out firing.
Do they still have those now that Butler left the conference?
Good
A good Horizon team?
Wright State's pretty consistent as far as the Horizon League goes. I don't know how that compares to the rest of the college basketball landscape, but they're right up there. They're a team, a lot of seniors, a lot of upperclassmen. You just never know when you get those guys playing their last game, give it all they got. May just leave it all out on the floor and may take one from Tennessee.
I like the Providence Friars. I think it could be a tough game against Texas A&M. But if they have the opportunity to win that game, I think a second-round matchup against North Carolina could be very interesting. The way that this team played Villanova twice this year, and the fact that they're not going to be taken out of a game because they do play pretty darn good defense, I think it's tough. I think that's a tough matchup if they get to UNC. I also think it's an extremely tough matchup for them going to play Texas A&M. So that could go either way, but that's my pick there.
Hey, I like that pick. I mean, Providence is a team that battling, as we know as Big East basketball fans, a team that battled injuries all year, lots of seniors, great coach in Ed Cooley coming off a great Big East run. That's a good pick. And did they
really
play?
Well manicured pants going into the NCAA tournament?
Well
I am
done.
certain.
Mr.
Cooley.
Somebody needs to get it.
Gatorade
They got enough.
skirt.
They got enough room on the bench. They need a tailor to travel with the team. Come on,
was
what's going on?
unbelievable. Ripping his pants in the Big East championship game. I've never seen anything like.
Great
You
television.
go back and some of the iconic coaches in the Big East and Louis Carnesecca, right, and JT, John Thompson Jr. Not JT3. He really wasn't iconic in any way, shape, or form. But Rowley, God rest his soul. Some of the, even back to Rick Pitino at Providence, Jimmy Calhoun. And we've never seen anything like what happened to Ed Cooley. He is a Madison Square Garden legend for life.
JT3 used, or John Thompson, I should say,
towel.
used to wear the towel by Troy. He's over the shoulder.
Right.
But,
and then time he broke out the Louis Carnesecca sweater, too. That was phenomenal.
But a lot of credit to Ed Cooley for keeping his cool and just throwing a Gatorade towel.
Well done.
I mean, a guy like Jay Wright, as spiffy as he looks every single day,
And credit
he probably would have freaked out, went to the locker room, started running around something. He just kept his cool. He grabbed a towel from a trainer.
You don't.
The manager.
Hey, now you don't know that Jay.
Jay.
You don't know what Jay would have done.
Oh yeah, I don't know.
Don't insult the man.
He was asked about it point blank after the game.
He said he didn't know what he would have done, right?
Yeah, he said
I mean, whatever manager or grad assistant, thought of that and got good on him. Getting him a full-time gig coaching somewhere next year. But I want to ask, did Providence played UNC in a second-round game a
couple years ago when Bryce
ago.
Cotton was on. Actually, I think it was longer than 2.
That'd be 4 years ago. Right?
Yeah, Bryce Cotton was on the team, and he put up about 30 points, and they almost won that game.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So longer ago. So not totally relevant here. All right, my picks. So I have 2 picks left. My last 2, I have quadrant 2 and 4 left. I'm going to go with quadrant 2 first. I think, it doesn't matter which I go with first. I think interesting team here, Florida Gators. An interesting team that up and down all year. A team that actually does return some of their leaders from the team that made that Elite 8 run last year. Head scratchers, like that loss to Loyola at home where I think we're in the 50s, and then some really impressive. I don't know, but I'm gonna take the Gators because they're a team that I think could lose in the first round or make it to the Elite 8.
Now that's a big game for you and Bob.
Yes, it is.
Bob's got his Bonnies UCLA versus Florida, big game.
And actually, in my bracket, I have whoever wins the St. Bonaventure's UCLA game winning that game. So I'm kind of doing the same thing you were doing. Yeah, I'm kind of doing the same thing you were doing with Tennessee and Wright State, whatever that is. And then my last pick, got to give Philly Big 5 basketball some love. The Quakers, Penn. I mean, hey, I don't know the history of probabilities for 16 versus 1 seed matchups, but I've seen Penn anywhere from 5% to 6% chance of beating the Kansas Jayhawks. I'll take it. That'd be a lot of fun. Go Penn Quakers. Toast to dear old Penn.
Hashtag Ivy Madness.
We'll have to do something special for Tom on the show if Penn upsets Kansas.
I'm in. I'm totally in. You got it.
Just bring some toast.
With nothing in
throw,
return.
Throw some toast. Here
That's
we go.
right.
That's right.
All right, I'm going to take the top team in the tournament with my last pick. Give me UVA. How do they last so long?
Oh, we can talk about that right afterwards.
Yes, we can.
All right. My last pick, I like the Arkansas Razorbacks, 7 seed in the East region. Like I said before, I don't think Purdue is a strong 2 seed. I like them to go to the Sweet 16 and give Texas Tech a run for their money.
And like we said, the reason we are picking in this odd order is we're picking 2 teams from each quadrant, 8 teams total, and it's a point system based upon the seed and the round in which they win. It is an additive rather than multiplicative how we do this. So if it's a 6 seed winning a second round game, they get in 8 points, et cetera, et cetera. So you have to pick 1 to 4, 2 teams, then 5 to 8 seeds, 2 teams, et cetera, et cetera.
So I'm looking for a big 17 spot out of the Penn Quakers.
Yes,
Here we go.
and then an 18 spot, and then a
go.
19
Boom.
spot.
Just keep it rolling.
Keep it
Keep it
going
rolling.
with the
Here we
Penn
go.
Quakers until it's Villanova versus Penn in the Final Four,
Then I can't take
like
Penn.
19,
Can't take Penn anymore.
right?
no.
Like 1971,
Yeah,
correct?
that's right.
How about it? So, that's some good stuff there, boys. A lot of good discussion. First of all, anything else we wanted to talk about tonight?
Well, I want to know, why was UVA still on the board, the number 1 overall seed, and nobody took? I mean, we took we took Nova as the number 1 seed. Did we take any other number 1 seeds in quadrant 1? I don't know that we
I
did.
came down to
Nova.
them or Kansas.
But
It's because of the in
why
part
is
because
it?
of the points.
But then
point
also,
system.
big news today that we haven't discussed yet on the show that I think a lot of people, well, I don't know, might overlook, and that is the loss of ACC 6th Man of the Year, DeAndre Hunter. And also a Philadelphia kid, so, shout out to the Friends League out of Friends Central. But, I mean, that's a huge loss. I mean, that's an NBA prospect with a huge upside. Breaks his wrist a few days before the tournament. That's a huge loss for Virginia. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a tough one for UVA, especially going against a team like Kentucky or Arizona in the Sweet 16. We talked about it before, 2 of the hotter teams in the nation right now, and UVA is going to get that test first game of the second weekend. If they make it there, I don't see them having a problem with that, but it could potentially present a problem for UVA, and I think those matchups are part of the reason why UVA lasted so long as well.
I actually went against the grain and picked Cincinnati to go to the Final Four before that injury. I'm sticking with it. I think at the end of the day, UVA does get burnt when they struggle to score. And that's really not rocket science per se, but they were up 18 points or whatever it was on Syracuse, and the Orange came back and went to the Final Four. They were up on Michigan State, same thing, gave it away in the Elite Eight. This team has had problems with it in the past. Some of these guys have since gone. A decent amount of them have. London Perrantes is no longer. Malcolm Brogdon is no longer, et cetera, et cetera. However, they are still prone to that at times, although I think their offense has been better this year. My concern against the Cincinnati is who's going to be the guy to get the shot late in the shot clock when you just need somebody to create. Maybe in part it could have been your guy. He's not there.
Who's going to bank it in?
Well, yeah, right. So I don't have Virginia going to the Final Four to start with.
And I think on the other side of the ball, actually, is where it also hurts. I mean, what's Virginia known for? Their defense.
Right.
And why their defense has been so effective is because they've had, Malcolm Brogdons. They've had, Andersons who have, the guys with that play that forward/guard position with a lot of length, that can defend multiple positions. And DeAndre Hunter was definitely that guy for Virginia coming off the bench. So that's a huge loss for a team that prides themselves on defense.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly the best defense we've seen in maybe ever. Who knows?
So let's hear everybody's, with all that in mind, national champions. Final Four and then national champions. Start with you, Kev, out on the left.
All right, so I'll start.
The audience is right.
Sure. Yes. Anyway, so I'm going to start in the South region. I'll go from top left, and I'll go down from there. Start with UVA. I like them in that region. I think they'll take one over Tennessee in the Elite Eight there. I like Tennessee to take Cincinnati in that matchup. I have a 1-2 matchup in the West, and I have UNC over Xavier. Again, I like the ACC a lot this year. I think they're just especially Duke and North Carolina, are getting really hot here at the right time. And I just think Virginia is a solid team, and they'll be in the Final Four. Up to the East region, I have our Villanova Wildcats. I don't see a whole lot of challenge. I agree with Tom that Virginia Tech is probably the team that scares me the most in their potentially first 3 games. I don't really like Texas Tech either. I'm not a huge fan of seeing them. I'd probably rather see Purdue in that situation, although, we may not have the big man to go up against Purdue, so that could potentially present a problem. But I still like the Cats in the Final Four, and then I like Duke over Kansas in the Midwest region. In the finals, I have a rematch of our Villanova versus UNC 2016 National Championship. And just for fun, I picked the final score as 77-74.
Who hits it at the end this time?
That's going to be a tough one.
Dante.
I know.
Dante.
That's what I was thinking. We talked about it at great length last week. Talked about clutch, not clutch. Does it matter? Does it not matter? What your study showed with, marginal results was that Jalen is the most clutch and Dante is the least clutch, if you will. But, yeah, I like Dante to be that guy, trailing behind, hitting
Well,
that
who do we
final
think
3.
it does inbound?
Don't
the
you
basketball
love
a
when
lot.
someone else interprets the results of your study? I tell you.
That's what you said.
We'll move on. Your
All
thoughts?
My thoughts is, hey, Dante would be the guy, right? He's the one that
Absolutely.
inbounds the basketball. I mean, I don't know who
Yeah.
inbounds the basketball specifically on Nova. I mean, the only spot-up shooter I can think that's close in playing style to Chris Jenkins would be Omari Spellman. That's kind of that guy that plays in the post and then, spots up and shoots. I mean, the closest player playing style is Omari Spellman. But, yeah, I think Dante would take that shot.
But you would have to think that someone in the role of Chris Jenkins would right now probably be Mikal Bridges.
I don't think they have Chris Jenkins. I think the closest is actually Eric Paschal, but,
Really?
But he's not really the shooter.
See, I was saying Omari.
he
was
is
the
a shooter. I
closest
mean, he's
been great recently.
Yeah, he's really been great.
He
shoots 1 or 2 per game.
Right, and Jenkins just looked to shoot more than
Right.
Eric would. In that sense, it would be more like Mikal. But yeah, I mean Dante probably shoots the most of anybody on this team right now.
All right, I didn't mean to get into comparisons,
Anyway.
Because I don't think
It's
there's
a
a good
moot
one.
point.
yeah, there isn't. But here we go. I got a similar Final Four to Kev. Actually, we have the same exact Final Four. I mean, I just thought this was Tony Bennett's year, the best defense we've ever seen. I know people make the argument that defense doesn't necessarily win basketball championships the way it does in football. I disagree. I mean, there hasn't been a team outside the top 20 defensive efficiency, and there's only been a couple teams outside of the top 10 to win national championships, and UVA is one of, if not the best ever. I just think it's Tony Bennett's time. That injury does scare me a lot. I mean, ACC Sixth Man of the Year, DeAndre Hunter, a guy who's really come to into his own recently, but I'm going to stick with him to beat Tennessee in the Elite Eight, going with the Cavaliers to make their first Final Four with Tony Bennett. And then in the West, I have a rematch of last year's national championship, Gonzaga and UNC. I just don't trust Xavier, frankly. I don't think they're very good. I think they got very lucky in many of their games this year. I mean, not to take credit away from them for winning the Big East championship outright. All credit to them. They definitely did that and deserved it. But I just like Gonzaga to come out of that group and face UNC. But then I have UNC, likewise as Kevin, making the Final Four. And then I'm sticking with our Wildcats, same as Kevin said. I think that second round matchup scares me with either team because Villanova has struggled against teams that have a guy. So Colin Sexton, is certainly that guy for Alabama. And we also, Virginia Tech's a very good team, like I said, with a coach who knows the Villanova program well. But outside of those, after that matchup, there isn't. The other top 5 seeds in that bracket don't really scare me. I like the Cats to go to San Antonio. And then Duke Blue Devils, a team that's figured out their defense since they switched to zone. I think they're the team that has had the most potential and the best upside all year in college basketball. It was just up to them to figure it out if they wanted it or not. I like them to beat Kansas in the Elite Eight to make it to San Antonio. And then I have UVA versus Duke, an all-ACC I mean, as much fun as it would be to have UNC versus Duke national championship, I don't think it's going to happen. UVA versus Duke national championship game, I would say low scoring, but with DeAndre Hunter, one of their best defenders, out, UVA might have to push the pace a little bit and might have to score more than they're used to. I would put that game at maybe Duke 68, Virginia 65.
All right. I'm going to do this a little bit differently. I'll tell you my Final Four, but I'm going to give you my 3 or 4 games that I think are the most intriguing and important games throughout the tournament that will shape this Final Four. The first will be Kentucky against Arizona, and we've talked about that enough, so I won't go in depth there. But I think the next team wears out Virginia a little bit, and then it'll be Cincinnati that will take down Virginia in a tight one and go to the Final Four out of the South. In the West, the key game for me is, if it gets there, of course, Ohio State against Xavier, an in-state matchup akin to when Mike Conley and co. and Greg Oden had to take down Xavier in just a wild 8 versus 1. I think Xavier does the job there and gets through that game. So that's kind of my big game on that side of the bracket. We'll keep it one more, because then I think Cincinnati versus Xavier, a matchup of 2 Cincinnati-based teams in a Final Four game, would be ridiculously intriguing. Xavier won against Cincinnati earlier in the year. It was a good game. I think they squeak it out again and get to the final. On the other side of the bracket, I think my key game there is actually, if we get it, TCU against Michigan State. I actually, on a flyer, I had to pick one team, and I think TCU, if getting hot, could find their way to the Elite Eight. They could also lose to Arizona State very easily, don't get me wrong. But I think that's a team that's played very well. Love the coach, Jamie Dixon. They've played a ton of tight games. They were under 500 in conference, but again, rarely got blown out, and I think they got a good crop of players. Then the last game I'll bring up is, I think Purdue against Villanova will be phenomenal if it happens. And I really think there's a possibility it does. If Purdue beats Villanova, I won't be surprised at all, but I happen to think that could be Villanova's toughest test along the way. So I got Cincinnati, Xavier, Villanova, and Kansas. I have Villanova against Xavier in the final, and I think for the third time, Villanova beats Xavier and wins the national championship.
Wow. So we have 3 ACC teams in each of our Final Fours, and you don't have one. How about that?
Zip.
Villanova Xavier would be an intriguing final matchup. But I wanted to go back to the Purdue-Villanova game that you were talking about. I think back to last year when we met up with them, and we didn't have Omari Spellman on the floor, but we had no answer for Haas. He was
not last year, was it?
That was last year.
I
thought it was 2 years ago. That felt like a
Gavitt games last year.
It was a long time ago, but it was early in the season last year.
And so I'm glad you brought that, because I was going to bring up that game. Haas was unbelievable, and Purdue played extremely well.
Right.
Is Omari Spellman, again, he's physical, which is good, and Eric Paschal has done a great job defensively. Haas, quite simply, has 4 to 5 inches over anybody Villanova can put on the floor.
Mm-hmm. And Omari Spellman has been a much improved defender, which will certainly help them this year in that matchup. But, this was sort of at a time when Haas was getting his feet under him. He was fairly new to the scene.
Yep.
He wasn't, the figure he is right now. And, I mean, if he started off that game as hot as he finished it, we would have had problems in that game.
Well, because it was a foul trouble issue, too.
Right. Absolutely.
So with Darryl Reynolds, right, as well.
I believe so.
He was trying to guard him, and that was a struggle. Now, Harms also could provide an issue, because this is not pure, but very, very focused on the high ball screen. And we've talked at length on that whiteboard all year long about how Villanova struggles to defend it. So it's another part of the reason I brought that matchup up as a very interesting one. And I think people are undervaluing Purdue for whatever reason, maybe just not quite flashy enough. Had a little bit of a rut midway through the season. Team is crazy balanced and really talented, and I think could win the national championship, and I wouldn't bat an eyelash. I wouldn't be surprised in the least. Yeah. They're that good.
I think it's the story of it's that team that has had a number of really good teams, not this good, I agree with you. Extremely balanced, a really, really good basketball team, the best team they've had in a long, long time, if not ever. But it's just one of those teams that people don't necessarily trust yet. Their team it's what everybody was saying about Villanova until 2016.
Exactly
right. Great team that they're really solid every year, but then they just don't get it done in March. So I just think it's sort of the case where people don't trust the Boilermakers yet.
Can't step up in big moments, can they?
They're
not clutch. Man. And I think that is the only pure and true way to end this thing. Guys, a great show here. Hope you guys enjoyed it, walking through the bracket with us, and, of course, trudging through the snow. And if you haven't gotten that reference, you came in a little bit late, check out the Facebook page about midway through or on YouTube. NFL Combine Blizzard 2018. Yours truly did his best. Was it good enough? I don't know. I'm not the one to decide. Tough to say.
It's up for you to decide, fans.
Yes, it is. But, guys, enjoy the madness. It starts, now. Second game starting right about now. Enjoy it. And enjoy the madness. Villanova plays at 6:50 p.m. on Thursday in Pittsburgh. And then they play on Saturday evening if they do advance on Thursday to play the winner of Alabama and Virginia Tech. And we'll be back next week to talk about it all. So for Tom Trainer, for Kevin Long, I'm Bob Long saying so long here from Philadelphia. And we appreciate the time. We'll see you next week on the Villanova Basketball Report.